Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mobile UX Marathon. We are very excited to have you all with us today. Thank you for all the wonderful chats. I was going to start today off by asking everyone where they're from, and it looks like you beat me to it and just started doing it. So we're going to give everyone a couple of minutes to join while we're waiting. If you just want to type into the chat and say hello to your fellow webinar attendees, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. Got quite a attendance here. We've got Spain, New York, India, Detroit, Boston, Argentina, Peru. I love this. We have quite a global audience. Hello from Mexico. LA, Austin, San Diego. Personally, I'm from San Diego, so hello. Prague, Dubai. Wow. We are joining you from San Francisco as well. Hello. Nova Scotia. Oh, high five from Brazil. Greece, Egypt. All right, so we'll give it till 11:03 or 11:04 before we get started, just to give everyone a second to log in. Seattle, Miami, Virginia. Hello. For those that have just joined, we're just giving everyone one more minute. While we're waiting, if you want to just type where you're joining us from into the chat box. It's great to see we have a very global audience today. Joining us from into the chat box. It's great to see we have a very global audience today. So hello to everyone that's just joined. All right. So we will go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining the first edition of our Mobile UX Marathon. We're very excited to have you here today. My name is Emily Ferdinandi. I am a mobile UX specialist here at Google, and I am joined by my colleagues Erica Trichu and Melissa Moody. For this first session, we are going to discuss some research that we've done on the main barriers to mobile success. And most importantly, how to overcome them. To give you a quick overview of where we're going to go today for the next hour, I'm going to quickly run through just the rules of the mobile marathon, how it works, then do a very brief recap of the pre-recorded video that hopefully you watched on the marathon website. That was called UX Beyond the Click. I will then turn it over to Melissa and Erica to talk about overcoming the barriers to mobile success. And last but definitely not least, we'll leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for a Q&A section. And that will be a combination of questions that you have submitted on the marathon website, and also some questions that you submit via the live chat. Marathon website, and also some questions that you submit via the live chat. With time restrictions, we won't be able to answer every single question, but please enter them as they come up, and we will do our best to get through as many as we possibly can. Without further ado, here we go. So the Mobile UX Marathon is a set of weekly webinars on how to improve user experience on the mobile web. There will be 6 different broadcasts, and they will all take place every Tuesday at this time, 11 Pacific, 2 Eastern, going through June 11th. If you haven't done so already, please register at eventswithgoogle.com/mobileUXmarathon. And I apologize, that is such a long link. Hopefully you only have to bookmark it once. The way that this will work is you will go to that website, and for each week, there will be a pre-recorded video, sometimes up to 3, and they will have content on that week's topic. Most of the videos are up to 3, and they will have content on that week's topic. Most of the videos are pretty short, about 5-10 minutes. So you'll watch those pre-recorded videos and then have the chance to submit questions also on the Marathon website. You will then join in for our live stream every week for new content, and we will include case studies in that as well. And then for answers to those questions that you've submitted during the Q&A portion. Mobile is a huge topic, so too much to fit into 1 hour-long session. That's why we've broken it up into these 6 different webinars. And there's a lot of really great in-depth information that we're looking forward to sharing with you. So next week on the 14th, we'll have UX best practices, followed by design sprints and research, using Google Analytics to inform your UX decisions, and then A/B testing with Google Optimize, and last but not least, finishing out the session with progressive web technologies. So a lot to keep coming back for and to learn. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. I wanted to do a very quick recap for those of you that didn't have a chance to watch the pre-recorded video this week. It was called UX Beyond the Click, and it was recorded by Prashant and Jamal, 2 of our product folks here at Google that work very heavily on mobile. There were 3 things that I really wanted to highlight from that video to set the scene for today. The first is that you are competing with the best experience a consumer has ever had. We often get in this mindset of looking at direct competitors or those that are in our vertical or our industry. And just a quick reminder that that is not how our users perceive their experiences. They are comparing you to the best experience they've ever had, full stop. So that's really the bar that we need to hold ourselves to and what we need to aspire to achieve, the best experience they've ever had. When we talk about experience, we usually discuss it in 2 buckets. The first is speed, and the second is UX, although we think they're both equally important. Speed could be a whole other 6 webinars on itself. For these sessions, we're really going to focus on the UX aspect of it. But speed is a part of that as well. When someone comes to your site, you only have seconds to influence them. It takes on average about 50 milliseconds to form a first to influence them. It takes on average about 50 milliseconds to form a first impression, and that first impression really matters. We see on average about 88% of online consumers are less likely to come back to a site after they've had a bad user experience. So making that first impression positive is extremely important, not just for that instance, but for having them come back again and again. And the upside is huge. A recent study from Forbes found that having a well-designed user interface can improve conversion rate up to 200%. So making sure that you're exceeding user expectations, that you have a frictionless mobile experience, can really have a huge positive impact on your business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erica to jump into how to overcome the main barriers to mobile.
Hi, everyone. Today's focus, as Emily said, is on barriers to mobile. What do we mean by that? We mean obstacles that are preventing improvement and growth to the mobile web experience. What do we hear most from our partners, and what are ways that companies are getting around these barriers? To dig into these barriers, Google worked with Circle Research last fall to survey 18 countries across different roles and industries to understand where most brands are on their mobile journey and what barriers are most prominent. 100% of respondents believe that a mobile website is critical or important to their business. And yet, few had a truly agile approach to iterating their mobile website. We asked, what, if anything, is stopping you from developing your mobile website to be that ideal mobile website? And we found that the research responses could be grouped together. Into 4 main themes. The first were those struggling with technical resources or constraints. The second was about difficulties in proving and measuring their work. Third was that there was a lack of the right expertise on the team and the right tools available. And lastly, the fourth theme was organizational, lacking the right support from management or an organizational structure that led to very siloed teams. When digging into that first technical barrier, the research showed that 36% of respondents felt that challenges with legacy IT and infrastructure were holding them back. Instead of being paralyzed by these IT challenges, it's important to start somewhere, even if it's just basic. It's likely that you're getting close to, or probably even over 50% of your web traffic from mobile devices already. So what can you do right now to help improve that experience without digging into that deep technical infrastructure? We recommend that you take a look at your key landing pages and put yourself in your user's shoes. Think to yourself, is the page loading fast, or am I waiting for that spinner to spin and spin? Are you providing a clear value proposition up front of why the user should book with your brand? Is it clear what action the user should take, and is it above the fold for the user when they land on the page? And is all the most important content, including that call to action, above the fold? My colleague Melissa and I wrote an article about effective landing pages on Think with Google if you want to learn more about these specific points. But the main point here on this slide is that you don't have to undertake a huge rebuild to have impact. Sometimes you just need to go back to the basics. And going back to the basics also means focusing on the user. So if you don't know where to start, think about what matters to your specific users and prioritize there. Go through your site as a user. It's always shocking to me the amount of people I speak to that have never gone through their site in entirety as a user. Started from beginning to end, making a purchase or looking for specific information. I recommend that everybody does that for their own site. Think about who your users are and their needs. Pinterest here is one example of a company that listened to hard feedback about their mobile web. People were speaking about their mobile web experience on social media and across the web. So they listened to them and considered their users and looked at their own data. They discovered that their old, slow mobile web experience only managed to convert 1%. Slow mobile web experience only managed to convert 1% of users into signups, logins, or native app installs. The opportunity to improve this conversion rate was huge. They created a team to tackle this and released a new site in bits, not all at once. They started with the percentage of logged in users and slowly worked up to the non-logged in users. Now, if you don't have the resources and feel a bit overwhelmed at the idea of doing something similar, of a complete rebuild like Pinterest did here, don't be afraid to ask for help. There are many qualified web development agencies that can help build optimized and mobile-friendly web apps. Debenhams here is one example. They recognize the need to double down on mobile. They made the decision to shift focus from old technology to new. In order to overcome their own internal resource limitations, they partnered with Sapient Publicis and built a progressive web app using the Mobify platform. Debenhams monitored conversions, revenue, funnel performance, speed, and bounce rates, all of which improved since their PWA's launch. And if you're interested in learning more about progressive web apps, be sure to join the webinar on June 11th, where we'll go through progressive web apps in greater detail. Deciding which metrics out of all the options and how to show impact were barriers for 20% of the research respondents. The important thing is to pick a metric that's relevant to what you're working on and what you're trying to achieve. TUI recognized the need to deliver a faster experience for their users, so they chose to focus on bounce rates and load times. In doing so, they found a strong correlation. As they reduced their page load times, their bounce rates decreased significantly as well. They also discovered that different metrics mattered to different parts of their org. So perhaps you need to think about what metric will connect most with your leadership. What metric excites your engineers? And Martin here from TUI said, we kept on talking about the benefits of speed at every level of the organization by making it relevant to individual people's focus areas, discussing bounce rate with SEO people, or monetary upsides with the finance team. The vision became shared. Or monetary upsides with the finance team, the vision became shared. So it's often about picking metrics plural, not just one. It's okay, and I'd say even a best practice, to look at a variety of business metrics, both big and small. Good user experience is not captured by a single point in time. It's composed of a series of key milestones in your user's journey. Understand the different metrics and track the ones that are important to your user's experience. Use your own analytics platform, like Eastpak did here, to identify and prioritize specific areas to improve on, and focus on those metrics. Eastpak realized that they needed to change their call to actions. They wanted to improve their newsletter subscribers, and as many of you, I'm sure, also wanted to improve their mobile subscribers, and as many of you, I'm sure, also wanted to improve their mobile revenue. They realized that they couldn't just look at one thing. One metric may not tell you the whole story. And if you're interested in learning more about analytics platforms and how to think about using them to improve your mobile UX, we have a Google Analytics specific webinar coming up on May 28th that you should join. If you're looking at one metric or only one set of results, you might miss the bigger picture. One of my favorite examples is when someone tells me that they want to focus on a metric like time on site. I always challenge back, well, is a higher time on the site a good indication that the user is engaging with your brand? Or does it mean that the user can't find what they're looking for and they're actually struggling and going from page to page until they get what they want? It's important to question results and to make data-backed decisions, like Telia in Norway did here. They were frustrated that their conversion rate on mobile lagged way behind their desktop conversion rate. And they needed a solution that would enable them to run A/B tests across their entire mobile site with minimal support from their developers. There are several A/B testing providers out there with which to partner to run regular experiments. Testing UX improvements can, and really should, become a natural day-to-day task. With numbers to back up any hypothesis, Telia's e-commerce team can now more effectively prioritize what changes developers should implement in the code permanently. The accumulation of many small improvements can implement in the code permanently. The accumulation of many small improvements can bring both business and customer value. And if you are interested in Google Optimize specifically that Telia used here, we're running a marathon webinar on June 4th to cover A/B testing.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, everyone. This is Melissa. I am Erica's colleague as we work across the mobile spectrum, the landscape. I'm going to talk about the last two barriers of mobile that we'd like to cover today. So to make these improvements and to move those KPIs that Erica was just talking about, you do have to have someone who can actually make the changes, whether that's from the developer engineering side or have someone who can actually make the changes, whether that's from the developer engineering side or from a design perspective. In the study that looked at these barriers to mobile, 23% of respondents reported that they did not have enough of that expertise, developer or UX, on their teams to reach mobile success. So aside from the simple answer of, well, you should probably hire someone who does, aside from the simple answer of, well, you should probably hire someone who does, let's look at some ideas to help you overcome this particular barrier. Firstly, we'd recommend that you're using tools that give you a clear list of what to do, what to fix. Now, there are a lot of excellent diagnostic tools out there. Personally, we use a lot of tools like Web Page Test and Lighthouse, and many of these are superb tools, but honestly, it can require even more expertise to just use those tools themselves. So what we would recommend for those of you who are working, just use those tools themselves. So what we would recommend for those of you who are working to overcome this barrier specific to a lack of developer time or expertise is to use a tool that doesn't just give you diagnostics, but actionable recommendations for improvement. PageSpeed Insights is what we're showing here. This is a tool that delivers site-specific and page-specific developer recommendations with very clear what you should do items. You can even see on this page, it goes into detail about how much you might even save based upon those recommendations. Now, to be fair, when we speak with our partners throughout the year, a lot of the time I hear, we don't have the time to fix all of that. Development teams are often swamped with fixing other things, or they're being tasked with the latest priority project. So essentially, when I hear that, it's not an overall lack of resources, but it's a lack of time among. So essentially, when I hear that, it's not an overall lack of resources, but it's a lack of time among the developers and UX folks. And I would say it is important to make the time for this optimization work. You don't want to let those little things pile up. Technical debt, right? Because that can get very nasty. If you remember back to the TUI case study that Erica mentioned, TUI actually decided as a business to allow their developers to spend a maximum of 80% of their time on business demands. That left them with 20% of their time devoted to maintenance and optimization. I think that's a very interesting business practice. We've also seen other partners run single-day hackathons or weeks dedicated to just covering up those things that need to be taken care of from an optimization perspective. Now, to get back to that barrier of lack of expertise overall, here's another idea. Use assets that already exist and can be plugged in relatively lightweight ways. On the left here, you're looking at the Places API from Google. This is an example of just one API that you could use to take known information about your customers. In this case, there's an incredible amount of known information from Google Maps that could be used to improve that customer experience on your own site. Go ahead while I'm talking here, feel free to share in the live stream if there's any other APIs that you or your teams have found useful for plugging in and improving the user experience. 61% of people say that they expect brands and websites to tailor information to their needs. We can help satisfy this user expectation if we integrate features that are using known information like auto-suggest or geographic location or time of day. And these are things that are already built and you can be plugging them in instead of having to do them from scratch or from your own information. On the right, you're looking at Google Sign-In. This is a component of identity services from Google that you can find at developers.google.com. developers.google.com/identity. This is just an idea of what a third-party tool might be that when plugged into your website would massively reduce friction for the user. And it would also reduce the weight on your developer and UX teams to have to build something like this from scratch. Instead, here, you're relying on the design, the security, and the interaction that's already taken care of by a third party, Google in this case. If you have action that's already taken care of by a third party, Google in this case. If you have low developer or UX resources, it's really good to think about what low-cost existing assets might have a big impact on the experience of your users. Finally, if you're feeling like a barrier to mobile is the lack of expertise, you do need to make it a priority to up-level your game. And a high five to everyone, you're already here on the webinar today. So thank you, you're already committed. I would love to also let you know that there is a great resource online. winonmobile.withgoogle.com is where you can take an entire course about conversion rate optimization. So if you're really looking to keep ramping up that expertise, I'd recommend you take a look at this and also to some of our articles on Think with Google. We've come to the last of the barriers that we identified from that research study. And this one in particular is near and dear to my heart. The final barrier that we heard about is that 1 out of every 5 survey respondents felt that a lack of buy-in from their senior management was a key barrier to improving their web experience. Now, in today's world, if your boss isn't bought in, of course, you're not going to be incented to work on mobile experiences, to build a faster or more user-friendly site. Incented to work on mobile experiences, to build a faster or more user-friendly site. So for this, we wanted to share 2 stories of large companies that have secured that executive buy-in and what the perspective is from those executives on why mobile really does matter. Hopefully you can use these to kind of spin your own executives into the right frame of mind. So the first company I'd like to highlight is Pfizer. This is one of the world's premier biopharmaceutical companies, and it's a parent company of known products like Advil, EpiPen, Xanax, to name a few. At this massive organization, as you can see on the quote on the right, the decision was made that they needed a better focus on patient experience. These are their customers, the patients. And it all started when they brought senior leaders across marketing, product, and more into the same room outside of the day-to-day business in the office. At that event, they spent time looking through the Pfizer portfolio of sites. And what the team saw made them realize they wanted to do better for their customers, for their patients. Following this event, site performance, delivering performant experience to the patient, became a central focus for all internal teams across their organization. And one of the ways that they are staying aligned around this goal is called a performance budget. This essentially means that between all the things that they might want to put on a page, there's a set limit that can't be exceeded so that the user experience will not be negatively impacted. At Pfizer, once there was alignment and agreement on this notion of rebuilding the site overall became much less daunting, and teams were empowered to start working on solutions. You can see from some of the stats on the slide that they must be very pleased with the results so far, and there's an ongoing commitment from Pfizer to build performant experiences for their customers. Now, as you might imagine, I'm showing you some very large companies here. It's not an easy thing to take companies with a massive amount of history and a whole lot of distinct brands like Pfizer, and here, Expedia, to make transformative change happen at these companies. For Expedia, their senior leadership buy-in stems from a focus on building a product that is going to be successful in the future. Not just today, but how do we build something that will succeed in the future? Expedia had an organization-wide goal of improving their mobile web experience for their net new customers. These days, they said, they view our mobile web conversion rate as more than just a business metric. It's a brand metric for them. Their mobile web business metric. It's a brand metric for them. Their mobile web conversion rate tells them how well they're delivering a fast, assistive travel planning experience that their customers are demanding. As you can see on the quote on the right, you could spin all day about desktop versus mobile conversion rates today, but Expedia is thinking about what is the actual experience going to look like in the future for their customers. What is the demand that the customers have of this company? And in order to build that experience, Expedia has committed to building with progressive web technology. They're building a foundation now that will see incremental gains increasingly into the future. If you remember Debenhams, the earlier example from Erica, there was a quote from them that said, "The C-suite views digital as the growth engine for the business." It's this future view of why we're committing to mobile that's really changed the view of a lot of executives at massive companies. And to get past the technical hurdles that we spoke about earlier, this top-level buy-in is absolutely key. So we all find ourselves ready to run this race toward great mobile experiences. We're ready to go. You're here today. We're all excited. But before we get going, and that's the reason for this first webinar, it's important to think about what might be standing in our way. We recognize that each of these barriers that might not apply specifically to each of your companies, but I hope that over the course of the presentation thus far, you might have heard some useful ways to overcome roadblocks that you are seeing. We hope that upon leaving the webinar today, after to overcome roadblocks that you are seeing. We hope that upon leaving the webinar today, after the Q&A, you'll each be able to think through which barriers are in your way currently and possibly have a plan for how to start addressing them. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Melissa and Erica. Everyone, apologies for any of the sound issues and the skipping. So hopefully most of you were able to follow along and the recording will not have skipping issues, but we're just going to continue with the Q&A. So we're just going to continue with the Q&A. We're going to start with the questions that were pre-submitted on the Marathon website. And I saw that a couple have been submitted on the live stream as well. If you have any that you haven't submitted, please do so now, and we'll go ahead and answer those. So to kick off the Q&A, Melissa and Erica, first question is, how would you recommend handling UX on mobile for a client purchasing a complicated and/or costly item? Is there a way to make people feel less nervous and more assured about making a custom large order on mobile?
Absolutely. I'll take this one, Melissa. Thanks, Emily. Melissa and I focus on travel clients in particular, so we hear this a lot from our travel partners. You know, booking a large cruise trip or a big package, customers can feel a little bit nervous to do that. So for these complicated or high cost items, building trust is really paramount with your user. And we feel that it can be done by building a great experience for them. If your site loads slowly, or if they can't get to what they want, or if certain parts of the site aren't responsive or are jarring, the customer loses confidence in you as a brand and with using their mobile device, to book with you. So it's really about making sure that mobile user experience is excellent. The other thing that we recommend a lot to our travel partners, and is good for all different industries, is making sure that the user can move seamlessly between devices. So they might not want to make that final purchase on their mobile, and that's okay. Allow them to save an item or favorite an item. I love it when a brand allows me to email myself an itinerary or a purchase that I'm about to make, so that they can either pick it up later on the device that they choose, or for some of these large purchases, they might want to email their family or their friend or their partner to be able to get their input before making that purchase. So making sure that the experience is great, but also allowing them to choose how and when they want to finish that purchase by making it seamless between devices for them.
Thanks, Erica. And I see some of you adding in your own suggestions and thoughts in the chat, which is fantastic. I'd encourage you to do that as we go through this Q&A. If you have things that have worked for you in the past or ideas to share, please feel free to type those in. So here we have customer reviews, building trust, all really great points as well. Customer reviews, building trust, all really great points as well. So the next question that we have is, I really wish I could see a list of great mobile websites using the best practices. This is something that we hear a lot. Who should we look at? Who is doing this the best that we can look to for inspiration? So Melissa and Erica, do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So, well, before I get into who's doing the best, I will say that we mentioned Page Speed Insights. There's a couple tools like Page Speed Insights and Test My Site where you can actually go and look at your competitors and see who seems to be doing well. So if you're looking for kind of benchmarking a little more technically, I would absolutely recommend using some of those open source tools to plug in your competitor sites, see how they're doing, and maybe be inspired. I would also point you to something that was recently done in Europe and APAC. It's called the Masters of Mobile, and it's available on thinkwithgoogle.com. You can see what some of the best are doing in those regions. Unfortunately, we don't have it currently for the US, but the inspiration that you'll take from European and Asia Pacific companies are very inspirational. I would also ask people who are on the live stream, go ahead and share in the chat your favorite personal experiences. Sometimes it comes down to that site that you've used that really put a good experience in your in your hand and let you accomplish what you're trying to do. In the interest of remaining neutral across anyone we may or may not work with, I will say that I really love Google Flights as a web mobile experience. It gives me the ability to sort and filter in a very intuitive way. And if you haven't tried it, it's a fun one to check out.
I think that's a great question. Those of you on the live stream, if you have any favorite mobile experiences that you think are best in class, feel free to share them in the chat now. I'd love to see who you all look to for inspiration as well.
In the meantime, I could share one of the experiences that I really appreciate as well. Mine is a funny one. Well, maybe funny, not really funny, but it's a home improvement store here in the US that I find very intimidating when I go into the store. So what I do before I go into the store is I look at their mobile website and search for the product or the item that I'm going to try to buy in store. And what they do is they tell me exactly, they know my location. They fill that out because they know my location from my phone, and they populate the store that's closest to me, and they tell me exactly what aisle, what row, and what bin number my little part that I'm looking for is located in. So when I get to the store, I don't actually have to hunt down someone in an apron to come help me find that little nut or screw that I'm looking for. I look at my mobile phone while I'm in the store and go find exactly where it is. So that's a great way of connecting even that online, offline experience. And I continue to use that company and even that online, offline experience. And I continue to use that company and go to their store because they have that great MWeb experience for me.
And on the live stream, we've seen a couple posted Amazon. Absolutely. Amazon has changed the way many sites are designing their UX, the way many users are just becoming used to going through mobile experiences and looking at suggested items, the way that they highlight Amazon's choice. They've really set a lot of best-in-class practices that we see many following. Someone here says that there are no frictionless mobile experiences, which raises the bar for everyone. No frictionless mobile experiences, which raises the bar for everyone. And just quickly to answer another question from the live stream, there was a question about sharing some of the sources and case studies that we've talked about today, and we can definitely add those into the comments of the YouTube video. All right, so coming up on number 3, aside from a complete website redesign, what are your top 3 to 5 recommendations for improving page speed or load time that can be done immediately?
I can take this one. That's a great question. I would say this is a really nice one that's answered pretty simply by the previous recommendation around Page Speed Insights as a tool. Page Speed Insights does a great job of delivering, as this question was specific to speed, for improving speed and page load time. It delivers some pretty concrete recommendations that are specific to your site. Some of my favorites in general that are, I would say, top recommendations would include looking at your images. A lot of sites that we partner with are loading very, very large images that if you loaded a compressed mobile-friendly size, it wouldn't look any different to the user. So look at the sizing of your images. That tends to be a very, very large top offender for slow websites, both loading the right size and using the right modern compression formats. I would also suggest there's a neat tool that's called Code Coverage, which allows you to look at the unused code on a page. I think you'd be surprised, many of us are, at how much code is actually not being used on a given page. And just cleaning up, getting rid of some of that, including old tags and old tests that have been run, cleaning up can do a lot for quick impact to a page. And the last one I'll mention is, for a top thing to think about is, look at what you're loading that is not visible to the user. So we spoke earlier about above the fold content. A lot of sites are slowed down because they're loading every possible image in a carousel that you can only see one to start with. So, or potentially images that are down below the fold that a user would have to scroll to. I would say those would be a few of my top recommendations for immediate page speed load time wins. Although hopefully we're also chatting UX today, we know that speed and the quickness of a page showing up is critical to that user's experience.
Yeah, a lot of speed questions. One more speed question.
You're lucky. We love them, you guys. We love speed.
So if our website is already near the limit of a good loading speed, so our website is already near the limit of a good loading speed, so 3.5 to 4 seconds on mobile, is it worth spending the money and most importantly time in order to make it faster, or should we focus only on UX?
So I'll take this one. I guess push first for more information, as I would if I were speaking to you as a partner or in a meeting. Is that your loading time for all of your users across all types of network speeds? Where are your users located? Are they in areas where they might not have as fast of networks? So is that 3 seconds in a 4G network, or how does it behave in a 3G network where people might have slightly flakier network connection? So in a 3G network where people might have slightly flakier network connection. So I always think that there is room to improve speed. I don't think anyone should just say, okay, we're at 3 seconds, no big deal, we're going to stop focusing on it. And we've mentioned page speed insights quite a bit today. As you can tell, it might be one of our favorite tools. But I think that's a great tool to be able to see what do you need to work on and what's the balance of work versus benefit. So it will tell you all the opportunities that you have, and it actually lists the time savings there. If you were to fix this issue, what time might you expect or speed might you expect to save when doing it? So if I were in your shoes, I would take a look at page speed insights and say, okay, here are the opportunities that are available to us. Which ones might be quick wins? And which ones might take a little bit more work? If there are quick wins to shave off another quarter of a second, half a second, I say absolutely keep chipping away at those. And speed and UX in half a second, I say absolutely keep chipping away at those. And speed and UX really go hand in hand. So it's one thing to only focus on speed and not UX, but you're just speeding up a bad experience. So you're still not going to get the benefits of having both. So it's really important that you're doing both together to get that great experience for your users.
I would love to just add to that too, that the idea of, is speed a problem for your users? So when you're evaluating, do I need to keep optimizing for speed? Have you asked the qualitative question, whether in a tool like user testing or another opportunity to speak to your users, are they reporting that speed load time is an issue for them? If they are, keep focusing on speed. If they're not, maybe shift your focus to something that is frustrating your users.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, so quick question about PWA. Building a PWA sounds like a lot of work. Why should I invest in those resources? For a basic website, purely informational, is a progressive web app really necessary? In other words, is it really practical to invest in a full-blown PWA for this use case? So for a basic website.
I'm going to steal that.
For this use case, so for a basic website.
I'm going to steal this one because I'm very passionate about this. And I will remind everyone that there is an entire webinar dedicated to PWA, so I won't go into too much detail here. But I would say, first of all, a progressive web app is, above all things, this is very important, it's progressive. So you don't have to do all or nothing. It doesn't need to be this massive undertaking. Building a progressive web app is about adding components that are going to make sense for your business and for your users and progressively make your site more reliable, faster, more functional, to the degree where we're getting to be more app-like in nature. To the second half of that question, a progressive web app at its core really ensures greater speed, reliability, and experience that's going to future-proof your efforts on the web globally or in the years ahead. So even though you might need all the doodads, all the little stuff, it certainly is practical to build with progressive web apps for the sake of a really reliable foundation for your customer experience. And bonus is if your site is less complex, actually a PWA can be easier to build and to get spun up in a shorter time frame. So I would recommend that everyone, if you need some examples, some inspiration, I know there's a site called pwa.rocks, and it's just got a lot of PWA examples for you to be inspired by or get your wheels turning.
Great. Thank you for that preview of the PWA content. The next one is a two-parter. So why should UX and design teams care about speed? And the second part is, why should other teams care about design and UX?
I'll maybe take the first one and hand it off to Melissa. But I love this question because we were just talking about how UX and speed goes hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. And looking at it from the UX and design team, I think, well, UX and design team, you won't get any of the glory. You won't get the user to even experience the excellent UI and design that you've created if the user never gets there. So if it takes 5 seconds for your site to load, chances are the user's gone. If it takes 5 seconds for your site to load, chances are the user's gone. They're going to a competitor and they're going to see that amazing UX design and experience versus seeing the great work that your team has done. So it's really important to have the user get to your site fast, or else they're going to bounce and go somewhere else. So the UX team really does need to care about speed. And speed matters across the entire org. You can find a study on Think with Google that we did with SOSTA Analytics that actually found that a 1-second delay in mobile load times can impact conversions by up to 20%. So when a marketing team or anyone says, oh, we don't really care about speed, it doesn't impact us, I really argue that it does. Speed matters across the entire org. If the user never gets to your site, they can't make that conversion, or they can't experience that great design that you've worked so hard to create. I think the second part of the question was, why should other teams care about UX? I think the second part of the question was, why should other teams care about UX and design? Melissa, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about senior level stakeholders, but I will mention maybe the marketing teams. So if marketers, if you're on this call, I want you to be listening. If marketing teams spend a lot of time and effort optimizing their campaigns, optimizing their creative, doing all this great work on the ad. But if the user clicks through and ends up in a bad experience, they're still not going to convert. Your eventual metrics, your return on ad spend is going to not be showing all that great work you put in. So winning with your ad performance requires the right message to the right user and then landing on the best possible experience. Sometimes changes to UX can improve CPA as much as any marketing optimization. So hopefully your marketing teams are really invested in this commitment as well.
So this last question for the submitted questions online is something we hear a lot. Mobile doesn't convert as well as desktop, so we focus our energy on desktop. How do you kind of combat people that have this belief and convince them that mobile is worth focusing on, even if it doesn't convert as well as desktop right now?
Liz and I are probably going to jump at the same thing because I think it's one of our favorite quotes in the case studies that we showed earlier from Aaron Price at Expedia. He says it so well, so I'm going to read it because he actually said, the most common mistake I see is marketers investing more in desktop because desktop drives better results. It's easy to optimize for what's working best. But this really isn't an apples to apples comparison. Conversions are worse on mobile because the web experience on mobile is worse. And today's desktop conversion rates won't do anything to provide the great mobile web experiences your future customers will expect. So basically the point there is, well, it's no surprise that desktop is converting better than mobile when the user is struggling with your mobile web experience. So back to what I said earlier about really putting yourself in the user's shoes. Go through your site as a user and making sure that you can actually complete a booking or make a purchase on your mobile website. I've actually come across partners that have said, oh, look, we just launched this great, amazing mobile website. And I'd spend an hour looking at it and I think, oh God, are you sending traffic there already? Because I can't actually get through and make that hotel booking. I can't figure out how to sort and filter. I can't actually do what I want to do I can't figure out how to sort and filter. I can't actually do what I want to do as a user. And so I really push that, if mobile's converting poorly, there's probably a reason. And it's going to be that you need to look at speed and user experience to improve those in order to bring that conversion rate for mobile up closer to desktop conversion. And they may never be equal. I don't think that they probably will. There was a question about the high expense purchases and things that take a little bit more consideration. Those may still want to be booked on desktop, but it's really important that that mobile experience, while they're in that research phase, is supporting that desktop purchase.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. And now we're going to switch over to questions from the live stream. Thanks to everyone who has both posted questions and have started answering them as well. That's fantastic. And we love that community and hearing from everybody else. So the first question that I'll pose to you, Melissa and Erica, is how do you deal with your executives or boss that the best solution is to rebuild the product instead of doing hot fixes? Sometimes it looks like this product wasn't done with mobile UX in mind. So it sounds to me like this is a question of maybe a legacy experience that was built for desktop first. And how do you make the decision between redesigning it completely or just trying to kind of make updates as you go to make it mobile friendly?
Yeah, if I'm interpreting the question correctly, it's I'm not sure whether they're saying we just want to do fixes and avoid a whole product redo or do a whole product redo. But in either case, we work with a lot of partners who basically by nature of what they're trying to do have to do a little bit of both. So what I've seen is some teams will dedicate a minimal amount of resource to making the existing website functional, essentially, letting it not be terrible, if it's hard to say that, as they are putting a greater bulk of the resources to thinking about what they need for the next 5 to 10 year out plan. So executives, in my experience, tend to be more invested in the 5 to 10 year out plan. They want to know, what are we doing to build a kind of a future proofing for our business? What are we doing that is going to really build the right experience? And that is fine, but I would say that you do need to retain, as that one case study we mentioned, you need to retain a little bit of focus on making the existing experience not terrible. So, I mean, it really depends on your business goals, but I would say if there is a full redesign on the table, you're going to hope for business goals, but I would say if there is a full redesign on the table, you're going to hopefully have good buy-in for that. You're going to hopefully go after it, but I would always make sure to set aside maybe 20% of your bandwidth to maintain the existing experience until a full switch over. I would also love to call out one other learning. This was brought up on stage by one of our technical partners. If you switch from one experience dramatically to another, it can be very disorienting and actually very negative for your customer set. They get confused, they don't know where to find things. One of the solutions that we've seen work very well is to take what I call a horizontal band of your users, to take a small group of users, say, just those who are coming back from a certain type of product, or just those that we know come in from a certain channel like email, and build the entire new custom flow for those users and see how it goes. Don't just slap a new website out for everyone, because it can be A, a lot of noise to measure what went wrong if it goes wrong, and B, it can be very disruptive to users who are already using your site and are now thrown into a new experience. So as you prepare to do any large change, please think about doing it either progressively in some way that is component at a time, although that can also be a little disruptive. More likely, do it for a certain set of your users first at a time, although that can also be a little disruptive. More likely, do it for a certain set of your users first and see how it goes. Build the new process end to end for those users and see how it goes.
And Pinterest was a good example of that, Melissa. That one of I think is the first or second case study that I mentioned on the webinar. When they rebuilt their entire site in a progressive web app or using progressive web app technology, they didn't just shove it out to all users at once. They started in just shipping the new rebuild to their signed in users, which if you think about it makes a little bit of sense, right? Those are users that are loyal, that are probably the ones that are going to deal with a few disruptions of a new site or work through a new site a bit more than someone that just lands there and thinks, oh gosh, I don't know what to do here. This is newer than when I last visited 6 months ago. I'm not sure what to do. So Pinterest is a great example of a brand that started with these thin slices, as Melissa was saying, to see, okay, let's start with our logged in users, and then they're going to be probably more vocal as well if things aren't going right, so we can learn from what they're experiencing and then ship it out to the next set of users so that they can learn experiencing and then ship it out to the next set of users so that they can learn from each slice that they add on.
All right, so next question. Thank you, everyone. I see a bunch of live stream questions coming in now. I see a few that I'm going to just kind of combine into a holistic question about how you approach this idea of mobile web versus app. So, Melissa and Erica, can you share any guidance on how folks should be thinking about, their mobile experience versus their app experience? There were some questions here about security and just in general how to kind of think about both of those experiences holistically.
Yeah, we work with a lot of partners.
Holistically.
Yeah, we work with a lot of partners for whom the app does still have a very, very important business value. So the app, an app is a really excellent asset, and it's not going away anytime soon. And yet they also realize that they need to have a presence on web. Quick example would be Lyft. Lyft is an app first company. They exist as an example would be Lyft. Lyft is an app first company. They exist as an app. They were built as an app. And yet they realized that they were missing a really massive audience without an excellent mobile web presence. So Lyft has built out a full PWA. You can go check it out. It's great. But I want to make that point because especially for companies with a global footprint, the app is a very restricted conversation. It takes somebody with money, technically it costs money and it costs bandwidth to download and keep that app on your phone. Whereas the web is really accessible in a much broader distribution. And from a global market standpoint, that can be very important. The one other statement I would make when considering your web and app strategy and how they work together, not necessarily one versus the other, but together, is that it really should be, again, about your user experience. If the user comes to you at your hotel front desk, you deliver an experience. That same level of hospitality should be available to them if they come to your app, and it should be available if they come via the web. To revisit that Pinterest case study, when users were coming to Pinterest on the web, it was a god-awful experience. There's a wonderful Medium article about it that you should read, but it just was not up to par. So instead of saying, well, we're doing one or the other, they did have to say, we're going to do both at a level which is respectful of our brand and conveys our offering to users wherever they come to us. I realize that does put more pressure on developers, and you may have to make priorities, but from a user standpoint, you cannot neglect one in favor of the other.
And each business is very different with the needs of whether they need a mobile. And each business is very different with the needs of whether they need a mobile web or a native app or both. So we definitely want to make sure that it's not one or the other, and they can complement each other. And if you have an amazing native app experience with strong loyal base and strong conversions coming out of it, just make sure that mobile web experience is up to par, so that if you get new customers, then you can convert them into native app customers. If you have a business metric of acquiring new customers and your mobile web experience is terrible, well, you're never going to get those customers to be repeat if they've had that terrible experience. They're not going to want to download their app after just one usage. I'd also recommend digging deeper into the Debenhams case study that I mentioned earlier. Their company in the greater case study talks about how they looked at their native app and realized that people weren't converting that often, and they were looking around, but the actual purchase rate wasn't that high. So they made a difficult decision to scrap their native app and build in a progressive web technology and move forward with that for the future, because that was what was right for their business and their users. Forward with that for the future, because that was what was right for their business and their users. So it's not going to be one answer for every business type or industry. It's something that you're going to have to look at your user base and what you can offer in a native app versus mobile web, and definitely take a look at the progressive web app webinar coming up, because progressive web apps are really taking all the amazing parts of native apps and enabling them on the web, especially when it comes to engagement. So allowing for things like push notifications and add to home screen that were typically only available in native app before. So I think your options are greater than ever before, but it's really about your business and your users.
Thanks, guys. I see a lot of chat going on right now about font size and accessibility, which is a really great topic. I am happy to let you know that next week's webinar is going to have an entire section dedicated to accessibility, where we will answer a lot of these questions. For now, I think we have time for one more. Let me see it. I really like this one. It says, Google Analytics can tell what is not performing, but how do you figure out the why? So which tools and techniques would you suggest for identifying the why behind the performance issues that you might see through your analytics?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the quick word answer would be qualitative research. So it would be actually sitting down with your users, watching them go through that flow, a targeted flow, if you know where the problem generally is from Google Analytics, and then actually asking, there's a lot of companies that do this. There's a lot of tools that allow you to do this, but just generally asking what was prohibiting you from doing that. Why? There's one great really asking what was prohibiting you from doing that. Why? There's one great example of Google Analytics I have where between the adding to cart and the checkout phase, there's a very large drop off. Sit down with folks and say, at what point in here were you dropping off and why? Was it a security issue? Was it a functionality issue? As Erica mentioned, sometimes you can just do it yourself and realize that a button doesn't work or it's dropping you in a dinosaur page. I do think the next step to the why behind the what is not going right would be qualitative research, and that can take a lot of different forms.
And it also helps to dig deeper into analytics. So you might say, okay, you might identify here's the problem, but in analytics, and I think all across all analytics platforms, not just Google Analytics, you can dig deeper. What types of devices is this happening on? What location is this happening on? Can you segment that data even further to determine, is this a subset of your users? That data even further to determine, is this a subset of your users that are dropping here, or is it all of your users? Because we've also found in some of our meetings, I there have an Android and others in the room have an iPhone, and I there have an Android and others in the room have an iPhone, and different versions and different screen sizes. We have found that the experience can be quite different on the different devices or screen sizes. So another recommendation we have is, once you identify the issue, dig deeper and figure out if it's a specific device, a region, an operating system. What more can you glean from those insights through your analytics platform? Because potentially it could be something that's not consistent across all devices, and that it's one subset of your users that's experiencing this issue.
Awesome. All right. That is all we have time for. A couple of last minute comments based on some questions that were posted. The recording will be posted on the site. The deck will not be shared in deck format, but you will be able to watch this and see the slides on YouTube. More resources are posted on the Mobile Marathon site, and most of the case studies that we've talked about today can be found on Think with Google, and we will update the comments to reflect which of those case studies we've referenced today. I apologize for those of you having the playback issues and the skipping. We'll definitely try and fix that for next time. We appreciate you sticking with us for our first live broadcast, and hopefully that will be resolved for next week's webinar. Remember to check out the Mobile Marathon website in the next week to see the pre-recorded videos and to post your questions. Join us next Tuesday to talk about mobile UX best practices. And a big thank you to Melissa and Erica for joining and sharing all of their insights with us. And a big thank you to all of you for participating in the chat and for following along with the webinar. We're very excited to have you on this journey with us, and we look forward to talking to you next week.